Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Dopamine Collective. I'm Rhonda Essling, licensed therapist, late-in-life diagnosed ADHDer, and mom, struggling to figure it out right alongside you. This is a space for women who get it, the struggles, the wins, and everything in between. Let's get into it. AI is not going to fix your ADHD. In fact, if you use it the way that most people are telling us to, it could actually make your symptoms of executive dysfunction worse. But if used correctly, it could be the best set of training wheels your brain has ever had. Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Dopamine Collective podcast. My name is Rhonda Essling, therapist, late-in-life diagnosed ADHDer, mom of two spicy little Spitfires, figuring it out as we go. I created this space because I spent years trying to fit in a world that wasn't built for my brain and nervous system. I know I'm not the only one. This podcast is for women who grew up being told they were too much or not enough and are finally starting to figure out why. We talk about real stuff here. Everyday stuff, parenting, diagnosis, relationships, things that actually help. And today is no exception. So, the honest conversation today is how to use AI to support your executive functioning. I want to say something clearly right at the top. I am not here to argue for AI or against it. I'm not here to sell you on it, and I'm also not here to scare you away from it. I'm a therapist and an ADHD coach, and I'm hearing a lot about AI, how clients are using it, how people around me are using it. I myself have been experimenting with it, and I think it's really important for us to make sure we're having nuanced conversations about how to use AI in a different way or in ways that support our thinking as opposed to harm it. Right now, the conversation around AI feels really split. Either you hate it or you love it. That's not what today is. Today is a different conversation. Today is a conversation around how ADHD nervous systems and brains work and how that can be impacted or impact the way that we use some of these tools that are available to us right now. This is just a snapshot. It's middle of May, 2026. So any of the information that we talk about today is going to be a snapshot of the way that things look right now. This isn't a one and done conversation. I'm probably going to keep things pretty high level, and it's also not the last of these conversations that I plan to have. So here's what I'll say about the fear. It's not coming out of nowhere. There is really early preliminary research supporting the fact that AI impacts our ability to naturally do some brain functioning, right? It can impact our thinking skills, the way that we process things. There is early research, very preliminary, that shows that people who engage with AI, allow AI to do the work for them, their brains are less engaged in the tasks that they are working on. I'll get more specific on that in a few minutes, but for right now, I just want to name that some of the fears out there are super valid and ones that we need to keep in mind as we're having this conversation. So think of it like this. Using AI in the correct way can serve as the bumpers in a bowling alley for your ADHD brain. It can be the scaffolding that you need to better function and to think better instead of doing the thinking for you. And that's the piece that is different. How do we engage in these tools in a different way so they can support our ability to do the thinking and creating without outsourcing or offloading the thinking and creating to the AI? So here's the one question that you're going to hear from me a number of times today, and I hope that it's the one takeaway for you. After you use an AI tool, ask yourself, do I better understand my situation, or did I just receive an answer? Okay, so in that vein, when we're talking about how instead of just looking for an answer, we can use AI to better understand our situation. We're going to talk today about the concept of scaffolding when it comes to ADHD executive functioning. This is not a new theory. This is not a new concept. It actually comes from education and working with neurodivergent kids. Basically, the idea of scaffolding is to put in place the tools, the structure to assist a student when they're struggling, with the idea that eventually they develop the skills, work their way to where they need less and less of that scaffolding, less and less of that structure. So, substituting is when you hand over the entire task and you're handed back a completed project that you didn't do anything for, you didn't think through, you didn't create. So this is the difference between scaffolding and substituting. Essentially, you don't learn anything from substituting. Substituting is just offloading the work altogether, and you don't grow, you don't develop, you haven't learned anything new. Scaffolding are the tools that we can use in order to better learn how we need to do the thing, right? While we're doing the thing, while also at the same time giving support so you can, especially with these executive functioning issues. Again, the question is, do you better understand your situation or not? That is going to help you determine if the way you're using AI is scaffolding or substituting. So if it worked, you got an answer, but you can't really explain the answer or come up with the reasons why, likely substituting. If it comes up with an answer and you have a really increased or improved understanding of the context of that answer, it very well may be that scaffolding was involved, right? It was helping you do the thinking and not doing the thinking for you. Okay, so why is substituting a bad thing? Well, inherently it's not, right? There are a lot of tasks that we can offload. We can substitute to AI. Maybe they're tasks that just kind of clutter your brain but are unimportant and you don't really need to learn a whole lot from them. That's fine. I'm not going to sit here and say there's a right or a wrong way to use AI. That's not the argument here. This is more about thinking through a different way to be able to use it. That is already a theory we use when we're teaching neurodivergent kids, right? So instead of substituting, why is it that, say, offloading this come up with my schedule for the week wouldn't be a good idea, right? We'll use this specific scenario because I've had a client come in and tell me that they did that. They used AI to help them schedule their whole week. In fact, I have as well. And so I've experienced firsthand what that's like. The problem is AI doesn't understand your energy capacity and how it fluctuates from day to day. AI doesn't understand that there are probably going to be last minute things that come up that you've forgotten about, that you didn't think to put on the list, right? There's all these traps along the way that AI can never account for. And they're especially relevant for people who are neurodivergent because when we get thrown off of that schedule, it doesn't work out perfectly. We tend to just give it up altogether. It's really hard for us to reset and get back on track. The other piece of this is that it can build dependency on the tool, right? And while that might not seem harmful, it is one of those when you're out of practice, you lose the skills, right? When you're not kind of thinking through things yourself through the week, you're not as connected to your overall schedule or prioritizing or how to navigate things when they come up, right? You're being told what to do, you do it. And we do start losing the investment into both making decisions with intention and also how we navigate these things, right? From your own value system. Okay, so there are two studies that are worth naming here, and I'm actually going to kind of refer to my notes. The MIT Media Lab's 2025 study, Your Brain on ChatGPT, coined a phrase that I love, which is cognitive debt. And this is the idea that when AI spares your mental effort right now, the bill comes back later, right? So having weaker memory of your own work and a lower sense of ownership over it, right? You don't have as much invested, and so you're less likely to feel as much ownership over what you're doing. So in their EEG brain scans, the heavy AI group showed the weakest brain connectivity. The no tools group showed the strongest. The idea is that AI spares your mental effort right now, but the bill comes due later. As weaker memory of your own work and a lower sense of ownership over it. In their EEG brain scans, the heavy AI group showed the weakest brain connectivity. The no tools group showed the strongest. A separate 2025 study by Michael Gerlich surveyed around 666 people and found that frequent AI use was linked to lower critical thinking scores, with cognitive offloading as the mechanism in between. But here's the turn, and this is the whole point with data behind it. In the MIT study, the group that wrote first on their own and then brought in AI afterwards actually showed better memory and stronger brain engagement than the group that used AI first. Order mattered. And this is what this whole episode is about, which is that it's not a finding against AI, but rather how we're using the tools. So basically, you're going to think first and then scaffold. The order matters. So let's be honest about these studies, what they are and what they aren't. It is early. These are very preliminary studies with small sample groups. So I don't want to overstate these findings. But what I will tell you is it does track with what we know about brain functioning overall, right? There is this sense of when you offload the task, especially when kids do that, it's going to be harder for them to learn overall, to develop the skills required to actually get the tasks done. And in truth, the research around AI is so much faster down the path of AI is bad than it is around how AI can be helpful. Again, this is a snapshot of what we know right now. And I know that it's going to be changing very quickly. That's why this is just the first of what I would imagine are going to be many conversations about this, about research that is developing and around what we learn just through using and experience. So another honest piece of this conversation is that AI is wrong a lot. It is confidently wrong a lot. I recently had Claude develop a book club sort of flyer, right, for my personal book club with my friends of my selections for the month. And every single book, I had to pull the information, I had to compile it, and then create the flyer. And every selection of books stated that the page numbers were 320. I didn't even notice it. I handed it out to everybody, and in the middle of our conversations, because let's be real, we take into consideration how long these books are when we're choosing what we're going to read. But multiple people noticed around the same time that all of the books said they were 320 pages. Nobody cared. It wasn't that serious. But the reality is, the more and more we offload or substitute our thinking processes to AI, the more at risk we are for it to confidently make mistakes. So the difference is, if you stay in the driver's seat instead of substituting the entire process, the likelihood is, instead of the information you send out being wrong, you're going to notice it in the back and forth. You are going to notice the wrong information and change it while you're going through the thinking process. It's literally just a bad suggestion at that point, instead of being ready to go out into the world and being wrong. So before we move on, I just want to name this. If you are someone who has reached for AI to substitute, to offload processes that are overwhelming to you, I just want you to know that that is not a weakness. And this conversation is not coming from a place of judgment around how you do that. The reality is, I just described a scenario where I did the same thing, right? When you have executive dysfunction, and you feel beyond your capacity, it can be a tool that makes it so you get the thing done or not, right? The alternative to me creating that flyer was that I was just going to have to tell everybody what the books were and we'd all Google them on our phones, right? It just wouldn't have gotten done because I was also finishing the book club book while Claude was doing that for me at 2 times speed. Anyway, so I just want to share that caveat. None of this is coming from a place of saying it's good, it's bad, this is the wrong way to use it, this is the right way to use it. More than anything, this is coming from a place of when we can think through how we want to use it, we may actually find a way to support our executive functioning. This could be an accommodation if done in the right way. And again, we don't know a lot. So this isn't me telling you I know how to do it and nobody else does. Okay. So where is the line? Basically, handing something off to AI is the equivalent of getting back somebody else's homework to turn in, right? That is sort of how it's designed. That's how a lot of people use it. And maybe they go through and proofread it or not. But ultimately, a lot of people are preaching that you just offload the entire work and have AI agents or whatever do it for you. So, how do you structure things in a different way? How do you do it in a way that makes it scaffolding as opposed to substituting? Well, instead of asking AI for an answer, you ask AI to ask you questions to support your thinking through until you come up with the answer on your own. So this shift turns AI from doing the work for you into more of a thinking partner. I sort of created a project. My daughter and I were experimenting with how to use AI to help support her executive functioning. So I created a special project that's just hers in chat. Essentially, it's her thinking buddy in Claude. And just the caveat, I am always supervising her when she is using that tool. She doesn't use it alone. And we'll talk a little bit later on about some of the boundaries, the limitations that I set in the prompting for that project for her. It was very intentional to do it as safely as possible. But again, she's going into middle school and her exposure to a lot of these tools are going to be more and more and more. And so I wanted to be proactive about experimenting with how to use this with her as well. Okay. So some of the AI traps that we can fall into as folks with ADHD, with executive functioning issues, right? So number one is having a task that is not one task, but instead actually 10, right? So when one task is actually many tasks, then it can be paralyzing, right? The overwhelm and the ability to break it down can really be hard to find. Could be referred to like as the trench coat, right? Where the one task is the trench coat, the outside. But inside that trench coat is a lot of different steps that actually have to happen that like a neurotypical person wouldn't have to think through. However, folks who are neurodivergent often have to expend a lot of executive functioning, a lot of working memory and energy for each one of those thinking tasks because they exist separately for us in ways that neurotypical people can just kind of like put it all together. I don't know how to better explain that, but it's a problem so many of my clients have where it's like every single piece of that requires a lot of energy and brain functioning that maybe the person next to them doesn't even have to think about, right? So the next scenario that we will be working through is like the prioritization situation where when everything feels urgent, nothing is urgent. So essentially, when everything on our to-do list feels like it has to happen right now, we have a really hard time prioritizing what to do first. So in this situation, you can ask it to ask you, what happens if that doesn't get done today? What happens if each one of these doesn't get done today? That's a good question. AI can ask you. in order to help you think through and prioritize the list that you've kind of brain dumped or whatever, however you end up using it. So a good example of how I have used AI with a task that isn't just one task, but instead many, many subtasks, right? That I am not thinking through yet, but each one of those tasks are going to require mental energy. I will often brain dump work projects or things that I want to add to my business, right? Like passion projects that I have that I really want to do, podcast ideas. I will brain dump these things and ask AI to house them in, like, say, a Notion board, right? Where I don't have to lose all of my brain dumps. Well, a good example of literally, this has just recently happened to me where I brain dumped this like business idea that I was so excited about, right? And instead of just taking that and putting it in my dashboard, because of the prompts I have in place and because of the way I have my AI set up, it really asked me questions. First, it provided information about other companies that are doing similar type of businesses within that area and comparisons or not comparisons. And then it started breaking down sort of priority and what would be sort of a trigger for me to start looking at this idea more closely. It also reminded me of the busy week I have and that the brain dump, like business idea dashboard, is probably the right place for that to live instead of me going down a rabbit hole around what that could look like instead of recording this podcast and getting some things done with my day. I still was able to get the idea out of my head. It's in a place with a tag that says need reviewed. But knowing the prompts that I have in place, there was a lot of scaffolding involved in me brain dumping that and it being put in a place after numerous questions were asked of me about the priority, about where that fits business wise, and if this is still something I want to hold on to. So that's a good idea. That's a really good example of this trench coat idea where, I just had this one idea and for me, that's all it was like the one idea. Really, this whole back and forth was maybe 3 minutes, but it asked me a few questions to clarify, to tease out the idea, and also provide some feedback about what else is out there. And then it sort of gave me do you want this entered into your dashboard? And it did it. Like the number of steps that were involved just in brain dumping that and putting it someplace where I could refer back to it were things I probably wouldn't have done on my own. So the next real life example here is a vague plan. When you give AI a super vague prompt, right? Like, I need to plan this event. I'm having an end of school year party in the backyard for all of my kids' school friends, right? I need to plan some end of school year party outside. That's not a plan. That's just putting it out there. So instead of saying, right, I need to plan this party, instead, AI can ask questions about where to start, about helping you think through, plan ahead. Ask about who's going to be involved in helping you plan said party. You can ask AI, what is the first step? What is the first physical thing I need to do to complete that task? And what needs to happen before you can do that, right? That question alone, so powerful. What is the first thing you think you need to do for that? And what needs to happen before you can take that step? The context around that piece of planning and AI being able to help with reflection and help you clarify that is a really big deal. And it's something we have a hard time doing on our own. So if you're not doing that and you just say, plan this thing, it will. AI will plan a whole summer party. It may or may not reflect what it is that you want to do. But the reality is, if it asks you, what is the first step and what needs to be in place for you to make that first step, it is forcing you to learn a different way of thinking about how you plan that. So this is what I mean when I say, did it give you an answer or did it help you better understand your situation? So next I want to name something, and I'm deliberately not going to go down a rabbit hole about this today because it's an entire podcast in and of itself, and a trailhead for probably many other discussions. We're just starting to have a conversation about how we can engage with AI in a different way. But one of the things that we can do is we can also incorporate our dopamine menu. We can ask AI to assist us engaging our level of dopamine, our sensory regulation profile, and also have an entire menu or plan already in place to make suggestions based on your response to that. So, also, the question can be, I'm having a hard time getting started. Ask me questions to help me figure out what I need right now to keep moving ahead. Right. So, I'm just naming that. And again, so much more really rich information around that is probably coming in the future. But for now, we're going to keep this on the level of how do you just interact with AI in a way that maybe can better support your executive functioning. So, 4 quick things to actually make this stick for you, 4 takeaways. Number 1, ask AI to ask you questions to support your thinking, not asking AI for the answer, right? So instead of substituting, ask AI to be the scaffolding. Number 2, feed it your needs first, right? Your sensory needs, your energy level, any constraints on your executive functioning in that time. Feed it to it first. Give it some context for you personally. Use it at the start and not at the finish, right? This can be a good way with the task initiation piece I was just talking about to engage. Ask AI to help you get started and then close it and go about doing the things that you're doing. And number 4, run a litmus test after. This is the question again. Did you learn something about your situation or did you just get the answer? Okay, this isn't just a nice idea. In fact, this is where a lot of the research that's come out so far tends to land. Gerlich's own conclusion could be a conclusion for this entire podcast, which is that AI isn't inherently bad. It is totally dependent on how you interact with and use the tools. The real goal is for AI to support human thinking and not to do the thinking for us. And those 4 points that I've already discussed are how you keep this on the productive side of you doing the thinking instead of offloading that to AI. So here's what I want you to take away from this. AI is there not to do the thinking for you, but instead to help you do the thinking for yourself, to be more effective at all of those executive functioning tools that are often really difficult for people who have ADHD. The bumpers don't roll the ball for you. You still have to do all the work. It just makes sure that it doesn't go off the rails. So that's what good AI scaffolding does, is it sets up a structure where you can do the thinking. You're the one rolling the ball. You do the work. And it keeps things from rolling off into the gutter, right? It pulls you back in. It can ask questions to support that scaffolding. I told you at the beginning that this wasn't an argument for AI or against it. And I hold to that. I'm not telling you to use it. I'm not telling you to avoid it. What I'm offering as a therapist, as a coach, as a clinician, is a way to use it that actually respects the way that your brain actually works. Clinically appropriate and supporting your own thinking with the scaffolding that could accommodate the executive functioning challenges that you already struggle with. What you do with that is yours to decide. There's no right or wrong answers here. This is just an option about how you can engage with a tool in a different way to be intentional about how you use it for you. So I just want to mention if this all feels overwhelming and you're having a hard time even figuring out how you would structure an AI prompt, maybe you have stayed totally away from AI and are feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of doing this on your own. I get it. And as someone who is very easily drawn down a rabbit hole, sometimes just hitting the easy button and asking for the tool is the most accessible option. So, just so you know, I do have available, and I'll have a link in the show notes, a couple of different versions of prompt generators for ADHD folks. I have one that's a workbook that you can go through and, make decisions on how to do it yourself. I have very sparse AI prompt generator, just a few questions, takes just a minute or two, and you can have something to plug into whatever tool you're using. And then I have a much deeper version that goes through a lot of these other aspects that we didn't even touch on today, including emotional regulation and rejection sensitive dysphoria and how to engage in safe ways with AI, especially around some of those things. And that's included in my workshops and programs. So there are a couple different options. The first two are totally free. And I will make sure that there are links down below, and there's no pressure. You can take the things that I described and totally do this for yourself. And I hope that you engage with this, that you try in a different way so you can make your own decisions about what actually works and feels supportive for you and what doesn't. Again, I'm going to reiterate. This is the first conversation about this that we are having, not the last. The research out there is very new and preliminary. And I know this is going to change so quickly. We're going to learn things as we go very quickly. And the technology itself is going to continue to change in ways that I guarantee, at least I cannot currently even anticipate. So know that this is going to be an ongoing conversation about AI and executive functioning. There's definitely more coming. The motivation piece, the dopamine piece. I do eventually want to get into how to use it safely and responsibly. Again, I've had clients use AI as their therapist outside of the room, and that has a lot of implications. And there have been stories that have come out, whether they're fear mongering or not, I don't know. But even in watching how my child engages with AI, I set some definite parameters about where AI goes, what it will respond to, and what it will not. I think it's going to be sort of the next level is what are the parameters that we want to keep AI into. We may have to set the limits because it feels in some ways like this tool has been set up to be limitless. For now, hand it a mess. Ask it to ask you questions to support you in doing the thinking for yourself. Make sure to give it context and ask yourself the question afterwards. Did I learn something about myself and my situation? Or did I just get an answer? And click the link below to join my mailing list because this isn't just a one-way conversation. I am so curious about how others take this information, incorporate it for themselves, what you learn. Any emails I send out, you can reply to, and I want to hear from you. I'm developing this not just for myself, my family, but also for my clients and to share in this capacity so that we can keep having what I hope are more productive conversations about how to engage in the use of AI in ways that feel intentional for us and also help accommodate our executive functioning. Also, leave a review and write comment. And if you enjoyed this episode and you found it helpful, please feel free to leave a review and rate the show so that others can find this information as well. I know AI is a hot topic, and I hope I was able to cover it in a way that feels useful and helpful, as opposed to this very polarized, it's awful and it's wonderful conversation that it feels like everybody gets pulled into. As a therapist, I know that we can hold both at the same time. And I think the conversation that I can have as someone who is not a tech expert, who is not in that field at all is what are ways that this could actually support us? And how can we use it intentionally instead of just how it's built to be used? Anyway, thanks for listening today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If this episode hit home for you, share it with someone else who may need to hear it. And come find the rest of the conversation. All of my links are in my Linktree / Rhonda Essling ADHD coach. I'll see you next time.